what's it about? It's a really happy story about the end of the world. It imagines how a global blackout would affect life in small town Scotland. And we all know how that story is supposed to play out, right? Your lights go out, then your heat's gone, and then the internet goes down, and then the water cuts off, and the police stations are burning, and very quickly people were meant to sort of descend into cannibalism and all what have you. And this story starts in the same way. It's a story about crisis, but I've got a wee bit more faith in our capacity for love and kindness and cooperation in the absence of government. So this is really a story about how ordinary people in a time of crisis are capable of doing extraordinary things, and how they can cooperate and bit by bit build a new world in the ruins of the old. And it starts with them just doing wee things like sharing a meal together that they've cooked on a camping stove, and then they do things like they're able to restart the water supply using wind power and stuff like this. So it's a happy story. It's a comedy, you know. It's putting the fun back into the apocalypse. It's got a lot of heart. It's got a lot of laughs. It's got a lot of adventure. It's a eulogy to the Scottish people, and ultimately it's a dream about how we can create something like the kingdom of heaven on earth. And all this for but less than 20 quid. Come on, eh? It's all right. The inspiration, I'd been trying to do my power cut novel for years. I'd been stuck with it. And then it was February 2020. Me and my then partner, we were on a train. This was down on the south coast of England. And she was pregnant at the time, and she needed somewhere to sit, and there was no seats. And everybody was completely oblivious, you know, they're all tired commuters on their way home from work. And I looked down the carriage, and every single person was just staring at their phone, just locked in the virtual world. Carriage completely silent, except for the robot voice, you know, reciting all these security warnings and telling us about the CCTV, and you see the cameras everywhere. And it was the weekend of Storm Dennis, but we just had Storm Ciara, I think it was, and the countryside was all still flooded from that, and it was the wettest February on record. It's probably been broken since, you know, every month seems to be a new climate record. And I just had this sudden profound vision that this is what 20th century science fiction writers imagined a dystopian future would look like. And I realised then that my story wasn't going to be about how we descended into dystopia. It was going to be about how we might escape from the dystopia that we're currently in. And of course, the other thing that was going on that weekend was the COVID, the coronavirus, that was just starting to dominate the news. And you know what happened next, right? It was lockdown. I think we sort of forget how frightening that first lockdown was, how bizarre it was, you know, because we had so many other lockdowns, and we got used to it. But that, you know, that first days when everything was escalating so quickly, and it was really, like I remember the day that they imposed lockdown, running around the shops, just trying to get everything we might need for a newborn baby, because we'd no idea if we'd have another chance to get supplies. But there was that really positive side to it as well, you know. We'd be those warm Thursday nights, we'd be all outside like banging pots and singing, and neighbours helping each other. and talking, and I realised my story was going to be about how we pull together in times of crisis. And it was a time of crisis for me, certainly. Like, by the time our son was born, we'd been isolated for quite a long time, only speaking to folk through video links, and even our antenatal services and all this. And at the exact same time, my work at the time, they launched a sort of redundancy thing, by email. Nobody even sort of phoned up and said, "Here, this is what's happening. We're sorry." And I was confronted with that, the faceless tyranny of bureaucracy, and I was appalled by them, and I was exhausted. The heart that's a wee boy. His mum. It was a really difficult labour, and she had a long recovery, and I was trying my best to look after him, and I just was struggling to stay awake. I think everyone who's got kids knows sort of what those first weeks are like, and like I started to hallucinate. I was so tired. I'd fall off, and I'd wake up, and I'd think I was falling asleep holding him. And one night I got up and carried him round the side of the bed to put him into his wee basket, and it was only as I was putting him down that I looked and saw he was already sleeping there, and there was nothing in my arms. And just in this state of tiredness and what have you, I started to hear a voice in my head, and he was just telling this story. And after that, I just started writing it down, and it came out really quickly. I'd just be writing it. Heart would be sleeping beside me, and I'd be typing away. And the things are like, and I didn't get made redundant, but it was a wake-up call to me to think about what's really important to me. And Hart's mum wanted to go back to work full time, so I said, all right, we agreed I'd stay at home with Hart, and I stopped most of my work. Now that's no. It's a very difficult time again. I'm not having a great couple of years. Buy my book, come on, buy it. I need the money. But I'll never regret, choosing to stay home with Hart, because it's been my time with him is it's the crowning glory of my life, and that's something that I hope the message that comes through from the book, that it's out of times of crisis, really good things can emerge, and that's true both at a personal level and at a societal level. Most of the great uprisings and revolutions in history come about at times of crisis, and we're in one now. I think it's written in Scots because that's how it came into my head. That's how I heard it. I probably wouldn't actually agree that it is written in Scots. I think it's written in a version of English that's influenced by the Scots language. But that's just how it came to me. And why not? I think our language is beautiful. I think it's rich, and it lends itself to rhythm and humour. There's this idea that you wouldn't speak or write in a Scots influenced language, or other deviations from dominant forms of English, unless it was as a sort of desperate necessity, unless you couldn't express yourself any other way. But that's not necessarily the case at all. You might like it. I'm struck by me and my boy. We live in Cheltenham Spa in England, which is a fairly genteel sort of a place. And he's a very cute wee boy, and we'll get talking to a lot of people in the park and whatever. And now and again we'll get talking to someone else who's originally from Scotland. And I'm struck by how our voices change in the course of that conversation when it goes from "Good afternoon, what a charming little boy, I do like his hat. Oh, thank you very much. Say, is that a slight Scottish lilt out of it? It is that, aye. We're frae Glasgow originally ourselves, so we're and you know, before you know it, you're spraffing about scranning your pieces on a broad day or whatever, and it's nice. It's nice to speak with a reminder of where you're from. You ever been to Denmark, right? Here's Denmark. They're brilliant at English, but nobody's going around asking them why they write books in Danish. So there's that. So it's not for me necessarily an overtly political thing. At the same time, you know, I've long been an admirer of Jim Kelman and his contribution to Scottish culture, both literary and you know and his political commitment over the years. And he's long raised important questions about why you get so many writers writing dialogue in Scots and then narration in standard English. So there is a sense, I think, that using your own language can be an anti-imperialist sentiment. There's two things to add to that. The first is that, like Kelman, I'm very suspicious of nationalism in all its forms. And the second thing is, insofar as seeking to preserve a local indigenous culture and language is an anti-imperialist act. The assumption there would be that we're talking about England as an imperial force. Now, that may, you know, you can argue about that, but increasingly the imperial power that's dominating us is American. And it's something that's happened particularly over the last 10 years, that politically and culturally the pace of the growth of American hegemonies increased, I think. There are an awful lot of disaster novels out there, and almost all of them are committed to a Hobbesian premise that in the absence of the rule of law, we are going to descend into a state of savagery, and it's going to be the war of all against all. And it's weird that that's such a strong societal conviction, because the actual sort of evidence from real experiences of there's a book by Rebecca Solnit called, I think, Paradise Built in Hell, and she looks at how people have actually responded in times of crisis. From, I think, the most recent example she gives is New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina, and she finds that actually people's responses are dominated by cooperation, by altruism, by mutual aid. And that's what happens in Disnaeland ultimately as well. So it's very unusual in that regard. It's not a book about how we all run around eating each other. It's a book about how we can pull together and cooperate in a time of crisis. By the way, when I say that disaster novels tend to be committed to a Hobbesian premise, I'm talking about Thomas Hobbes, the English Civil War era philosopher, in whose book Leviathan says basically that we really need a strong ruler to dominate us, because otherwise we're all going to go rage and start eating each other. So, you know, we're naturally savages, and it's going to be the war of all against all. And this idea that our essential nature is savage, and it's really prevalent in an awful lot of our literary culture. You know, like The Heart of Darkness, or Lord of the Flies. You know, like the beast is in all of us. But it's in the post-apocalyptic genre that writers really go to town with that. So I was interested in doing something different. And I've also got interested in how we've lost hope in the apocalypse. You know, like the apocalypse used to be a good thing. Like the Book of Revelation promises us the kingdom of heaven and earth, and I'm interested in, you know, like medieval millenarian Christians like Thomas Müntzer and Jan Mattis and Hoffman, all these crazy guys, and their faith that there was going to be some great reckoning that would wash away the evildoers. I find that thought very comforting, and yeah, so I wanted to put the hope back into the apocalypse, and there's still a lot of interest in the book in Christian eschatology and Jehovah's Witnesses and all that kind of thing. What will readers get from this book? It's got a lot of heart. It's got a spirit. It's got fight. It's a love story. It's a page turner. You know, it's about a time of crisis. Time of crisis, challenges come fast. Almost every page, the characters have got to respond to something new, and there's a lot of laughs along the way as well. It's full of wry Scottish humour, absurdist satire, and hope. I think anybody that thinks back to the first coronavirus lockdown and the way people pulled together knows that a time of crisis doesn't have to mean antisocial chaos and violence. And we live in a culture where there's a lot going on to make us afraid of each other. And Disneyland's about how we can work together. And maybe if it's not too bold a claim, maybe there's some motivation there for us to try in little ways to build a better world. And I'm not talking about going to the ballot box. You know, Emma Goldman said if voting changed anything, they'd make it illegal. I'm not talking about who we vote for. I'm talking about the little things we can do and how we live our lives. And the book tries to hold a mirror up to contemporary society, to unhappiness and wealth disparity and climate crisis, and asks, is this the best we can do? And another world is possible, right?